Hello, I'm Hilary Cole and I'm the portfolio holder for planning at West Berkshire Council, and I want to welcome you to this evening's meeting, this evening's Facebook Live session. If you've got any questions, do drop them in the live chat below. But I have to say that we've had lots of questions already, and I doubt very much whether we'll be able to answer all of your questions this evening. I'm joined this evening by Brian Little, our Planning Policy Manager, who will be answering the bulk of the questions because they're of a technical nature. The session's primarily for residents to ask their questions, but we have had a lot of questions from the leader of Thatcham Town Council and the parishioners of Bucklebury. So those questions will not be fully answered this evening, simply because, as I said, we'll run out of time. What we have done is looked at the questions that we've received and we've put them together in themes. So Brian will be addressing the questions in themes. However, all of your questions will be answered individually and posted on our website. So after the meeting, after this session, you'll be able to look on our website and get the answers to your questions. And I hope that's acceptable to you all, but that's the best way we felt that we could deal with the number of questions that we've had in the limited time that we've got available. And also, because this session is being recorded, you'll be able to view the session again on our on YouTube. So I'm going to hand over to Brian now, who will outline the sort of questions that we've had and how he will be answering them. Thank you. Brian.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Hilary, as Councillor Cole has already said, I will be looking to put the questions together in a group and try and go through in a logical manner. That means that I will read out the name of the people who have asked the question and the topic. So hopefully you'll all recognise what part of your question has come forward. As we've already said, your detailed questions will be responded to at length. Nothing will be omitted, and questions that come through on the night will also be responded to at length, and all of that will be put on the website. This is a new format for us, so please be aware of, be kind to me, please, ladies and gentlemen. I've also tried to put this in a logical order. So the first question, it's all about the evidence of needs, and it's primarily from somebody called Barbara. So without getting too technical, although the obvious answer will be much more technical than this, the government has produced a formula, an algorithm, if you like, which calculates how much housing need each local authority in England should provide. This is based on the National Household Projections for England, produced by the Office for National Statistics. And it also factors in affordable housing. So if they decides that the area hasn't, the house prices are too high, it boosts up the supply in order to get house prices down. That's the theory. Each local authority must plan to deliver at least this minimum amount of housing, and must also take account of national policy to boost housing supply across the country. And that number changes every year. So the second question I have is from Gavit, is from somebody called Gareth, who asks about COVID and have we taken account of COVID in our housing work and in local plan work? The simple answer is no. The work on the local plan began a number of years ago when COVID hadn't even been heard of, and the plan goes through to 2037. And personally, if I'm still here in 2037 with COVID, my beard is going to be so long I won't be able to walk. So the local plan responds to changes in the demographic profile in the future, we have to review the plan every 5 years, even though this plan goes forward to 2037. So we'll look at that at the first review. So the notion that more people are working from home, workers leaving the cities, all of that will be able to be taken into account when we have the evidence. At this moment in time, we do not have the evidence. My next question is one of my favourite questions, and it's from Anne Ivor and the Upper Bucklebury residents. And if Councillor Cole could mute herself and turn off for a minute, it's all about political representations. The political representation of members of PAG, the council ward members and all the rest of it. Planning is all about policies, it's all about independence, and therefore it is a full council decision. It goes before an independent inspector who looks at all the evidence the council has put forward. So it can't gerrymander, if you will excuse that expression. And then it comes back to council for adoption. And then the council has two ways forward. It can either adopt the local plan as amended by the inspector through the process, or it can reject it and start all over again. So, for example, just north of us in Vale of Whitehorse in South Oxfordshire, they had a local plan that went through. They had a change of political administration. They decided they didn't like the local plan and weren't going to adopt it. And the Secretary of State said, well, if you're not going to do that, I'm going to step in and I'm going to overrule you all, and I'm going to decide everything from Whitehall. So there's quite a big stick behind the planning authorities to get local plans done. Moving on to a myth bust. First myth bust is Graiseley. And this comes from a question from Dominic. All through the local plan process, which started way back in 2016, Graiseley was never seen in West Berkshire's eyes as being the magic bullet that would resolve all of our housing needs in this local plan period up to 2037. One of the clear reasons for that is Graiseley is at the right on the extreme of West Berkshire, and therefore developers in Thatcham, Newbury, Hungerford would all come forward and say, hang on a minute, we need housing here because Graiseley doesn't do anything for us. It's all about Reading. So Graiseley was never considered to be part of West Berkshire's main housing needs. If Graiseley had come off, it would have been supplemental to and would have actually come into play much more in the next local plan. Moving on, as I have said, the local plan process has been going on for a number of years. And this leads me directly into Peter and John's question, which was about the review of previous sites. So we had sites put forward for the core strategy way back in 2010, 2012. And those sites are as a matter of the public record. We then had more sites put forward in 2016, 15, 16 for the housing sites allocations development plan document that was adopted in 2017. So when we started this process, we did a call for sites that built on all the sites that we had put forward as part of the core strategy and hadn't gone anywhere, put forward as part of the housing sites allocations DPD. And the team contacted all those developers and said, do you want your site to be considered again? And it called for new sites. So our starting point was all the sites that had been put forward previously and then new sites. And all of that information is available on our website. And you can click on the maps and show that. So in addition to that, you can see, for example, that all the sites around Thatcham have come forward time and time again. There has been a lot of questions about the AONB. First, and those have been summarised from questions from Gareth, John, the Upper Buckerby residents, and another John. Or I hope it's another John, or it's John who sent in two questions at the same time. And before I answer that, I've got a gentleman called. I'll come into two questions from Ivor. Ivor has asked, does the algorithm calculate AONB, AWE in flood zone restrictions? It takes account of the area of outstanding natural beauty, but not AWE or the flood zone. Brian has asked if he just said no to having a local plan, fine. What we'd have then is planning by appeal, and we'd have applications from all developers, all seeking to build their housing at the same time and turning around and saying, look, West Berkshire, you're not meeting your local identified housing need, therefore my development must go forward. So the short answer, Nicola, I have questioned. The local plan as proposed does say take a whole lot of more things into account. We've now got space standards, and we have now got things like full fibre and vehicle charging points all put in. So coming back to the AONB. So John, Gareth, Upper Buckerby residents, and the second John. 74% of West Berkshire is area of outstanding natural beauty, not 80% as I've seen some people say. And the National Planning Policy Framework is very restrictive in what can be developed in the AONB. It is clear it is in exceptional circumstances, and it is limited into minor development. In addition to that, we have got Hungerford doing their own neighbourhood development plan, and we've got Lambourne doing their own neighbourhood development plan and setting out policies for their own housing needs. In addition to the outstanding natural beauty, there are an awful lot of policies that mean that we have to protect that character of that landscape as well. And the policies in the emerging draft local plan do exactly that. They look to preserve and enhance that area. So one of the questions is, for example, about renewable energy in the AONB. Well, there are a number of studies produced by the North Wessex Downs management team about restricting renewable energy because it doesn't go with the conservation aspects of the AONB itself. So there are policies about wind turbines and there are policies about solar farms. Having said that, I do know that the AONB management team in the North Wessex Downs are looking to update their policies on renewable energy, but those are going to be some years away and are not available to us as part of this local plan process. They will be available as part of the next local plan review. So having ruled out the AONB for major development because of national policy, why Thatcham, why Siege Cross? A little bit of history. Siege Cross was rejected by the council because it's not in the council's local plan and the planning system is plan-led. But that was only after the local authority had rejected it. It went to planning appeal and the planning inspectorate said it was a very sustainable location for development. It was then called in by the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State concluded it was indeed a very sustainable location for development, but it had come ahead of the local plan process. The council knew that decision was coming, and it knew that when it would look to its next local plan, that Siege Cross would come forward again. So the council was proactive. We commissioned work to look at what's best for Thatcham in the future, and the master planning evidence showed, as a result of that, that strategic development was the best way forward to support the service provision and regeneration that Thatcham required. And that evidence is on our website. If the evidence had been contrary to that, we would have had the evidence to fight off the developers at the appeal. Contrary to that, the next question is, hey, why can't we put it all in the showground and also Cheveley? Well, the Newby showground has not been promoted for residential development, and therefore it can't be considered. Furthermore, it is also in the area of outstanding natural beauty. And the council's approach to development is to continue to conserve and enhance the North Wessex Downs AONB with appropriate landscape-led development, delivering wider environmental, economic and social benefits. An awful lot of you have spoken about the climate emergency that has been declared by West Berkshire Council and what we're doing about carbon change. Rachel, Miriam, Gareth, Peter, Richard, Dominic, for example. All aspects of the emerging draft local plan are targeting achieving zero carbon. For example, Spatial Policy 1 is the strategy which is the approach to where development should be located, directing development to the most sustainable locations throughout West Berkshire. Spatial Policy 5 specifically addresses climate change. Spatial Policy 6 on flooding directs developments to at least areas of least flood risk. And Spatial Policy 22 is all about transport and renewable energy. Development Control Policy 3 looks at building sustainability, sustainable homes and businesses. I made it so going on to the sustainable homes strategy, we're looking to introduce the homes quality mark that is being promoted by the Building Research Establishment, which was it's a government agency. They've had our formal policy on sustainable homes. The direction is for zero carbon with our 4 stars. And you won't be surprised to note that in our roughly 2,000 responses, most of the developers have said they do not want our zero carbon approach to go before what the government is producing in terms of the new home standard, which will be zero carbon, but only zero carbon ready, not zero carbon implemented in the future. Steve has asked a question about the showground in the AONB. Is it also a brownfield site? Brownfield doesn't necessarily take precedence. It's just the same. There is a higher protection in the AONB, just like there is a higher protection in the green belt. So no, it's not right to say a brownfield site takes precedence. We'll come on to Paula's questions a little bit later. So part of the climate change, I know Gareth has asked a question about various renewable energy streams To be perfectly honest, I have a difficult enough job trying to get through housing development, let alone policies for small nuclear reactors for communities to have more energy efficiency in their local areas, Gareth. So that's why there isn't a policy on small nuclear power generation, but there are wider, more general policies about solar power, wind power, and it's appropriate technology in the appropriate location at the appropriate time. Now, during the lifetime of this plan, it is far more likely we'll see greater development of air source heat pumps as opposed to ground source or any other technologies. And our policies are wide enough to allow all of that to come forward, including hydrogen. But we need to be adaptive and ready and fleet of foot for when those new policies come forward. A lot of people are questioning about our traffic levels and congestion, and also the railway crossing. And Paula has talked about the bridge. So a lot of big work has been done on our transport assessments, and they have concluded so far that there would be some increase in traffic, but that can be mitigated. We need to remember that we're projecting forward into the future. People are talking about the need for zero carbon development, and the proposal for North East Thatcham is to be based around that. It's to be ensure that there are electric vehicle charging points right from the start. There are alternative ways of travelling to the station than getting in a car. That could involve bicycles, greater walking infrastructure, also more working from home, so that the number of people that are getting out onto the site, out from that site, is less. Also, the local primary schools and a new secondary school, all within the concept of a 20-minute village, and that is outlined in the Thatcham Master Plan. So, in terms of Paula, what will the existing Thatcham residents gain from this new development in North East Thatcham? You're getting new primary schools, a new secondary school, access to a new country park. One would hope that the development of this area would also spur the impetus to redevelop in the town centre itself. We've had the Kingsland permission that has been sitting there since the 2005, 2006 for the development of the Kingsland area that didn't go anywhere. There would potentially be greater impetus for developers to come and look at that. So, there is a lot more to gain than just, this is just going to be a bolt-on, that's going to be a community in its own right. It's not. The aim is to integrate that area into the whole of Thatcham. Rachel, were our traffic assessments done during COVID? No, they predate COVID, but I'm sure that we will have work done, and our traffic assessments will show the difference done after COVID as well. But I would not be going into a local plan examination trying to argue that the level of traffic that is COVID related, when everybody was stuck at home, is what the new normality is going to be. I think I would be laughed out of the examination room by all the objectors. So in terms of a little bit more about the infrastructure that is being proposed, because we've had a lot of questions about infrastructure from Rachel, Richard, Jesse and David. Picking up on the green infrastructure, the master plan is looking to provide a new country park, and Countryside is in private ownership and is not always accessible to all, and is always at the risk of the development. yes, we have our public rights of way, which we seek to protect. The green infrastructure, such as the country park, would benefit from the policy designation to protect it from the start. And there would always be a presumption against development in that country park itself. The northeast site that is being proposed is at a transformational time in how we choose to travel. The site will promote alternative means of travel to the private car at every opportunity. It will be designed so hopefully electric car charging vehicle points will be built into the scheme from the start and not as an afterthought. Now, many current residents may not choose to make journeys on foot or bike now, but following COVID, one could hope that that will increase. We do know in work done in Newbury that we did manage to increase alternative modes of transport. Again, I know somebody has asked the question about hydrogen. I think hydrogen is in the future. It's not ready for inclusion in this proposal as yet, but we never know. The policy is out there that if somebody wants to put in a hydrogen petrol station, for want of a better word, although that is an oxymoron, hydrogen petrol station, a fuel station, that could come forward, but it would be up to the developers and the promoters, because we do say that there will be employment opportunities. Barry asks an excellent question about viability. One of the key objectives of the local plan that we get tested on at the examination is that we have to ensure that the whole plan has been tested for economic viability. So work is being done to prove that our policies are viable. One of the objections that we've had, as I've already said, from the house builders already, is saying that our policies on zero carbon houses are not sustainable because they are not viable. When we went to the core strategy examination in 2012, we had a policy on zero carbon housing from 2016. So my argument straight away, ladies and gentlemen, is if we had economic viability in 2010, that sustainable development and zero carbon was acceptable then, it must be acceptable today, despite all that's gone on in terms of COVID and the economic downturn. It's the way, you know, the government is keen for us to be building better, building beautiful, and ensuring that everything, the country is moving forward as quickly as possible. Owen's just put up a question to everybody, and I'm fairly certain I do not know the answer to that, Owen, or what the issue is there. But like I said at the beginning of this meeting, we will come back to all questions that have been asked and provide a full written response. Graham, and before I move on to the next one, Ashley's come in. Any plans for Kennet School with an expansion of Thatcham? I can tell you, Ashley, that the Kennet School and the promoters of North East Thatcham are in discussions. That's about as much as I can say.
And at this stage, Brian, I'd like to say I did have a meeting with the head of Kennet School some months ago, and I know that Kennet School and the governors are very keen to work with both the developers and our education team to ensure that we get the best possible solution for secondary education in Thatcham.
Thank you for that interruption there, so I can have a nice little refresher of the throat. Graham, I hope you're on. I know this is affordable housing is a real passion of yours, and Jessie's also interested in affordable housing because she's looking to move into Thatcham. We are very proud of our affordable housing approach in West Berkshire. We seek 40% affordable housing on all greenfield development. And on the larger sites, we get close to that. There's always a little bit of horseplay around that issue, but we are very successful. So with North East Thatcham, potentially, we are looking at around 700 affordable houses to come forward over the next 10, 15 years as the site is developed out.
Brian, I see Nicola's asked a question saying, how many of the houses will be co-owned with housing associations? Well, we, Nicola, don't hold any housing stock of our own at the moment. So we will be working with a registered provider, a housing association, for these houses to be managed. And Fiona Brown is asking a question about vacant properties that currently exist, along with the ever-increasing commercial properties that are no longer in use due to COVID. Redevelop these. Well, some commercial properties are already redeveloped. In the past, they've been redeveloped to a very low standard with very little amenity space, which have not made them either attractive to anybody wanting to live there or, even more importantly, mortgageable. So the new NPPF is setting out more guidelines with regard to the conversion of commercial properties, and certainly the Housing Ministry is very keen on seeing commercial properties, old commercial properties, being demolished and replaced with housing. But we also have to bear in mind that just as we have to demonstrate that we have a housing land supply, we also have to demonstrate that we have enough supply of land for employment. And that has to be really, really understood, which is why we're working to develop out London Road Industrial Estate, principally for employment, because we need the employment land. And with regard to vacant properties, then at the moment, the council's policy is that any property that's been vacant for, I think, probably more than 2 or 3 years, we charge 3 times the amount of council tax on those properties to encourage those property owners to bring them back into use.
A couple of questions about the bridge there. Who would pay for the cost of a bridge estimated at 15 million? That's a very cheap bridge. And the cost of the bridge, I believe, would have to be borne by the developer. There certainly would be no government grant for a bridge at Thatcham. And my current understanding is Network Rail, if they are facilitating residential development, would not only be looking for the bridge to be paid for entirely by that development, but also would be looking to seek some profit, net gain from the development area. I do know that a lot has been said about the bridge. There is a lot of work already in the public domain from the planning policy side of things as to why the bridge is not viable and is not suitable at that location, and is not part of the North East Thatcham stuff. And I do know that the council has committed to look at this issue as part of the local transport plan. So like I said, we'll get more more going forward. In terms, how long has this development been planned for? I've already alluded to that we've been working with the possibility of Northeast Thatcham now for about 24, 36 months. And we knew in 2017 that Siege Cross was going to come back into play later on. We knew that the residents of Thatcham had been crying out, saying that they needed a new secondary school from the time of the core strategy. So it is only right that the council has looked at this in the background for some time.
And I think, Brian, we also ought to point out that before COVID lockdown, I don't know if it was late January or early February last year, we had a workshop in Thatcham with residents and Thatcham Town Council. The consultants came along, the master planning consultants came along and gave a presentation, and we had lots of discussion, and people put forward their ideas of what what they would like to see with regard to the development, which we've taken on board when we came up with the master plan that was published. So there has been a lot of public consultation, and I believe you and other officers also met with Thatcham Town Council to discuss this development.
Yeah. We have. Going back to Graham and Jesse and the affordable housing, Graham's asked a particular question that is a favourite of his: social rent. Unfortunately, Graham, I can't control social rent policy. That's done by national policy on housing, and it's not part of the planning process. What we do seek is for 70% of our affordable housing allocation to go for registered social providers and not part of the right to buy or in shared ownership. So the majority of the product of affordable housing in West Berkshire is geared towards those who are least able to get on the housing ladder.
There's a couple of questions.
Yeah.
About agricultural barns developed. If agricultural barns are developed, it will need a planning permission, which is outside of this necessarily the local plan for current agricultural barns, but we do have policies in our local plan, in our current local plan, with regard to houses, new housing in the countryside, and barn conversions in the countryside. So that's already covered up, isn't it, Brian?
It is, but agricultural barns themselves could be permitted development if they are being used for livestock, or as part of the general farming process. But I mean, by all means, Susanna and Barry, if you have got an issue about agricultural barns in Hampstead and Marshall, please drop me a line, and I can have a look into it for you separately and come back to you with a response on that. Obviously, the local plan is for the whole of West Berkshire. And I know we said we would talk primarily about North East Thatcham and Thatcham in particular. And I am not surprised that I haven't been able to get away without talking about Sandalford. So Peter and Anne, thank you very much. Yes, Sandalford was proposed back in 2010. And we, as you would have seen from the Newbury Weekly News, we're about to go into appeal on it. And for those of you that have looked at the emerging draft local plan, you will see that we are still proposing Sandalford. How is that applicable to North East Thatcham? Well, to be perfectly blunt, we've learned from our mistakes. We haven't taken what has been put to us at face value. We have been challenging, we have pushed back, and we have undertaken our own independent research on the issue as per the 3 Thatcher Plan pieces of work that we commissioned from David Locke Associates and Centec. So, yeah, I'm not saying we've got it 100% perfectly right. If we were, this, as I said, this is emerging. If we produced a highly polished plan, you'd be saying it's a fait accompli. It's one of these things that we are emerging and taking further forward. And there are some comments that have been put forward tonight in the more detailed sections that I'm thinking, yeah, they are really, really good points. We'll make those. We'll have to look into those as part of the response to this consultation process. Brian has asked some detailed questions about Stirling cables in Newbury and about the road there. I don't have the answers for you, Brian. I haven't been able to find the answers for you today, but they will be provided for you in the future, and you make some very good points. Now, this is a question that I think nobody on the chat tonight will be expecting me to answer. So, Rachel, thank you very much for your question. And Rachel's question is, how do I stop the development of North East Thatcham? Well, you've started that process, hopefully, by responding to the Regulation 18 consultation. The local plan is not a done deal. You have the opportunity for a further consultation response to say, I really do object to this. You have the further chance to attend the independent examination. And I'm sure, Rachel, if you're not invited to attend, Thatcham Town Council would certainly be attending. And I'm sure Councillor David Lister, if he's still in control, would love the opportunity to take on board your views and weave them into Thatcham Town Council's response if they are still opposed to the development as it goes forward. But even then, at the end of the local plan process, even if North East Thatcham does go ahead and get allocated as a site, you still have the opportunity to comment on the detailed planning application as it comes forward at each stage. So this is not it's not a fait accompli. You have plenty of opportunities to get together with others to turn around and say, the council has got it wrong, and this is my evidence, and this is my proposals on what the council should be doing. So it's not just a question of saying no, it's saying no, and here is the alternative.
And Brian, I think it's probably worth saying at this stage that although I can understand people's concern about that number of houses at North East Thatcham, 2,500, that if the scheme did go ahead, then during this current plan period to 2037, 1,250 houses will be built out, and the remaining 1,250 would be built out following 2037. So it's not as though people are going to be waking up one morning to see 2,500 houses sitting in North East Thatcham. It will be a gradual process. And I think we've also had some questions about healthcare and healthcare provision. And all I can say to that is that we're working hard with the NHS estate, West Berkshire Care and Commissioning Group, and the 2 local GPs to ensure that everything's joined up funding wise if the proposal progresses. Now, we're getting towards 6:45. We're at 6:45. We're getting towards the end of this. So I just want to reiterate, if we don't get through all of your questions this evening, they will be published on our website. We've got an answer with regard to improved infrastructure for existing residents. And I did indeed, this is from David, say that provision that Thatcher's facilities are woeful. And I think Brian's already alluded to the fact that we will be looking and expecting to see improvements for the infrastructure in the whole of Thatcham. The Kingsland Centre is already, I think, working towards improving that. So I think the whole of the development will enhance and improve, particularly roads and the ability for people to get around better.
Yeah, the whole purpose of something like North East Thatcham is to be an exemplar for zero carbon development. The 700 houses, affordable houses, we hear tales of people in their 30s still living with their parents in Thatcham. So what are the benefits? Well, the affordable housing, the primary school, the secondary school, the increase that new development brings in terms of new blood to an area. Neil has said, will North East Thatcham replace Sandalford? No, Sandalford is going ahead. It's still in the local plan as a proposal. So, Newbury is taking 50% of all, or approximately 50% of all the development going forward in the local plan. Do I have a plan B when North East Thatcham is proven to be unsustainable? If North East Thatcham is unsustainable through the examination process, either the examiner will have put in alternative sites to development in West Berkshire, or he will find the whole plan unsustainable and he'll throw it out, and the council will be left with a period of having to sort out where development is going to go, and that could quite well be development by appeal. The details about the Flora Way A4, that is part of the local plan process. As part of the local transport plan, we're working with the local transport team to sort that out, and that will be forthcoming. It will be there. It's just not in the level of detail that David wants to see at this precise moment in time. The final question that I had on my time was timescales. And thank you, Dominic, for a very timely thing. But before I answer that, I have one other myth to bust. At no stage have I seen the word biomass generation plant on the new North East Thatcham proposal. I don't know who has suggested that there can be a biomass energy from waste facility on North East Thatcham, but it's certainly not something that I have seen in the local plan proposal. So finally, Dominic's question on timescales. Well, we're still working through our consultation responses to the Regulation 18, and we had around about 2,000 responses to those. So some of those are suggesting changes to the local plan. Some are saying scrap it and do it all over again. The government requires us to have a local plan in place by December 2020. Excuse me. The government requires us to have in place a local plan by December 2023. If we do not have a local plan in place by then the government reserves the right to come and enforce a local plan on the local community. To that end, we're working, and the team are working very, very hard to progress all that information, to make all the suggested changes, to take those all through members, and to take those to council. and submit to the local planning inspectorate before the end of this year. And we're hoping that that will be done sooner rather than later, so that we can go to examination next next spring. So that is our timescale, and that is what we are working towards. And that is published in our local development strategy, our LDS schedule, sorry, too many acronyms, local development schedule. In the same time, we're doing the minerals and waste, and the minerals and waste local plan will be sent to the planning inspectorate in the next couple of months. So that is all the questions that I have. Very quickly.
About the old Contel site, will that be considered for housing now the business area is closing? Well, that's very much down to what the site owners want to do, and that's more of a development control issue rather than a local plan issue, I would think, Brian, is it not?
It is. I'd also have to check on whether or not the Quantel site had actually been put forward for housing at any stage in our examination process from the Housing and Employment Land Availability Assessment that is available online.
And Brian, you've been telling people about the local plan and how it will be examined in public. And I think people need to also understand that they can make representations, personal representations to the planning inspector at that hearing, should they wish to do so.
They can do so. And Paul has thrown up a question about care homes. We don't separate care homes from our overall housing need, Paula. So there could be more care homes if the need is there for them.
And I think that Paula, would be discussed in conjunction with our adult social care service, because I know their feeling is that we don't necessarily need care homes. We need more supported living for our residents, or housing that can be adapted as people get older, so that people don't have to move out of their own home, but can live in their own home as they get older, with more, because the houses are already built to that standard. We've got a question now from Antoinette about houses in the east of the district. Rather nice to have a question about houses in the east of the district in Calcott, Brown and Tilehurst.
Off the top of my head, right. So off the top of my head, I can't give you the numbers of the houses in the eastern area. We had looked for 175, but that is as one of the responses to the Regulation 18 consultation has questioned that. So we need to do a little bit of work on that together with the neighbourhood development planning group. In terms of sill, yes, we are looking at the level of sill. We are reviewing that again. And in terms of the infrastructure plan and lack of amenities in the east, we are going around at the moment talking to all of our service areas inside the council and external parties as well, asking what sort of infrastructure they would like to see or they are needing in the area. So yes, we are looking at that.
Well, I don't think we have any more questions on the chat, Brian.
Well, in which case, thank you very much for listening to me drone on for 45 minutes. As I said, this is the first one of a new style local plan. I'm much more akin to getting out and meeting members of the public and talking to them in presentations in village halls and the such like. But thank you.
And I'd like to thank you, Brian, for giving us some clear and easily understood answers to some very complex questions. And thank you again to everyone who's asked us questions, who's joined us tonight. I hope you found it useful. And just to remind you that this session has been recorded. It will be available on our website, on YouTube, on our website, and the answers to all of the questions that you have submitted, which we couldn't possibly cover in any great detail this evening, will also be posted on our website. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Good night.